Hello. All right. Just a quick query from one of the students. So I'll be resolving this. This is a question from December 2019 SBR paper, right? Luke Lloyd Company. All right. Let's read the question. It says Luke Lloyd Company acquired 60% of the 10 million equity shares, so that's 6 million, of Hammond Company on 1st July 2007. All right. Two Luke Lloyd Company shares are to be issued for every 5 shares, 2 is to 5. The ratio is 2 is to 5, acquired in Hammond Company. These shares will be issued on 1st July 20x8. So the acquisition is on 1st July 20x7, but there is a deferral in the issuance of shares, which will be issued basically on 1st July 20x8. The fair value of Lookout Company share was $30 at 1st July 20x7. Hammond Company had previously granted a share-based payment to its employees with a 3-year vesting period. Now, this is a scenario that I want to discuss in this lecture. All right. So there was a share-based payment initially which Hammond Company issued to its employees. Let's see the details. At 1st July 20x7, the employees had completed their service period but had not yet exercised their options. All right. The fair value of the options granted at 1st July 20x7 was $15 million. A scheme that has already been completed, the vesting period has been completed, but the options have not yet been exercised. And at the date of acquisition, this scheme stood out to be at $15 million. All right. As part of the acquisition, Lookout Company is obliged to replace the share-based payment scheme. I would like to underline this, obliged. That means an obligation on the parent company, right? To fulfill the obligation of the scheme that was introduced by the subsidiary, right? Now let's look at further details, right? To replace the share-based payment scheme of Hammond Company with a scheme of its own, which has the following details. So now there's a replacement scheme in place. It's essentially a modification of the previous scheme issued by Hammond Company, right? And obviously, since it's Loop Lloyd's obligation now, everything will be done according to Loop Lloyd, right? Let's see. Loop Lloyd issued 100 options to each of Hammond Company's 10,000 employees on 1st July 20x7. This is the date of acquisition. The shares are conditional, so there are conditions attached. First condition is on the employees completing a further 2 years of service. Now, just analyze the situation over here. Anyone who's not completing further 2 years of service will not receive either basically the shares from the new scheme or the previous scheme, right? Because now the schemes have merged. So essentially, the vesting period now is what? 3 is the previous and 2 is the new. So 5 years vesting period. This is the new vesting period. Any expense that you record, that Looper will record, or will be treated as as purchase consideration as per IFRS 3, is to be spread over 5 years, right? And we'll see how. All right. Additionally, the scheme requires the market price of a Looper company shares had to increase by 10% from its value of $30 per share at the acquisition date over the vesting period. This is a market-based performance condition. A market-based performance condition, right? There are no revisions in the market-based performance conditions. Service condition, yes. Non-market-based performance condition, yes, but no revision in the market-based performance conditions, because all the probabilities of it happening or not happening are included in the fair value calculation, which is basically calculated at the date of at the grant date, right? Now, it was anticipated at 1st July 2007 that 10% of the staff would leave over the vesting period, but this was revised to 4% by 30th June 20x8. That means there was a revision of 6%. So basically, the expense would increase by 6%. right? At first, July 2027, if you estimate an expense, obviously, since you're allowed to, since you have to make the revisions in the service condition, you'll revise uh, the percentage of employees going out, right? The fair value of each option at the grant date was 20, so you have the fair value at the grant date. The share price of Blue Bird Company 30 June 2008 was $32 and is anticipated to grow at a similar rate in the year ended 30 June 2009. We don't care about it because it's a market-based performance condition. Every probability of it happening and not happening is incorporated in the fair value at the grant date, right? Question: how the consideration for the acquisition of Hammond Company should be measured in further 27. Now, obviously, I'm just looking at IFRS 2 over here right now. Okay. Your answer should include a calculation of the consideration and discussion of why only some of the cost of the replacement share-based payment scheme should be included within the consideration. 4 marks for this. Now, obviously, there's an easier element to this question as well, which is the issuance of shares, a deferral in the issuance of shares again, but obviously you will record any deferred consideration is to be recorded at fair value, right? As per IFRS 3. Now, I'm talking about IFRS 2 over here. A total expense that Hammond Company took over, I would say, an obligation that Hammond Company took over from Blue Ploid Company took over from Hammond Company was $15 million, right? But this $15 million pertained to 3 years only, right? But a condition was attached to this obligation. I will, for example, if I'm Luploid, I'm saying that I will only fulfill this obligation if the same employees that were granted this basically the shares equal to this value, right, will remain for further 2 years. If they agree to it, I'll own this obligation. Now this will be my obligation basically, right? I'll take up this obligation. And any employee who's to remain for a further 2 years, obviously the benefit that they look at the scenario over here, the benefit that they were basically getting over the period of 3 years, now it's being extended to 5 years. Since the benefit is being extended to 5 years, right, my expense will also extend to 5 years. Fine. So the 15 million outstanding at the very beginning is to be prorated 3/5, which turns out to be, I believe, 9 million, right? 5, 3, 9 million. Got it? So $9 million out of this $15 million will be taken up as the purchase consideration. Why? Because this was the amount that was outstanding according to Luploid at the date of acquisition, right? Not the whole 15 million, because now this previous expense will be spread over the new vesting period. IFRS 2 in this scenario says, it has a certain principle to it. It's basically higher off, right? Higher off the original vesting period or the new vesting period. So let's suppose this vesting period was to be reduced to 2 years. Then obviously the original 3 years would be recorded, right? So therefore, the new period, the replacement scheme brings a new period of 5 years. The original scheme had a vesting period of 3 years. As per the principle of IFRS 2, you obviously take 5 years, number one. And principally speaking, I told you why it should be 5 years. Because the benefit that was earned for an employee over the period of 3 years has now an additional condition that you have to stay for another 2 years to get this benefit, to realize this benefit, right? So this is with respect to the employee. A benefit for the employee is an expense for the company. Simple. So $9 million is outstanding at 1st July 2087, right? Which will be, as per IFRS 3, included in the purchase consideration. Fine. Now, how much of an expense for the share-based payment scheme should be recognized in the consolidation, in the consolidated profit or loss of Loop Lloyd Company for the year end 30th June 2028? Your answer should include a brief discussion of how the vesting conditions impact the calculations. Right? I've already told you how the vesting conditions impact the calculations. Right? Service condition will obviously be revised. Sorry. All right. The service condition, we were expecting an outflow of 10% of the staff, but by the end, we're expecting how much? Only 4%, right? So 10%, which was revised to 4%, right? So technically, it's what? 100 options into 10,000 employees, out of which only 96% will be staying. This is an estimate at 30th June 2028. Fine. Into each option had a value of $20, right? I believe this will, let me calculate it, this will turn out to be 19.2, right? $19.2 million. This is the total value of the scheme. I'm calculating the total share-based payment reserve over here, right? Now, I have out of this 19.2 million, I have already Loop Lloyd has already recorded $9 million as purchase consideration. So you're left with what? 10.2, right? This is to be recorded in the post acquisition period. But again, this could be revised based on the number of, in fact, 30th June 20x9 will tell you the actual figure, because that is the final vesting date, right? It could be, an outflow of no employee. It could be an outflow of 5% employees. It could be an actual outflow of 3% employees. We cannot determine that right now. But as at 30th June 20x8, we're seeing a revision of 4%, which means 96% will be with us. That means an expense of how much? An expense of 19.2 million as a whole, out of which 9 million has been recorded as purchase consideration, right? And will impact the goodwill. Post acquisition period reserve is to be created for $10.2 million, but again, this is over a vesting period of 2 years, right? So $5.1 million for the current period. Got it? This was the solution that in the examining solution, I believe they've taken 90%, right? So a lot of students got confused over there that why shouldn't we revise the 10% to 4%, right? Obviously, at the date when you're recording the expense is technically for the year, right? So, but obviously, you at 30th June 20x8 or by 30th June 20x8, you came up with new information, right? The new information said that only 4% of employees will be leaving the company. Now, obviously, you have new information based on, for example, performance of the employees, KPIs that they have fulfilled, right? Whatever it is, okay? It could be, a de-layering scheme. Initially, a de-layering scheme was announced because of the acquisition. Now they're not de-layering it. The employees, they're not kicking out the employees, right? This could be another reason, right? So there are different reasons which could obviously give you this estimate, okay? So obviously it will be recorded according to the new estimate.